The Scott Horton Show is brought to you by books, particularly Kesslin Runs, a new dystopian novel about the very near future by the great Charles Featherstone. Kesslin Runs. Also, No Dev, No Ops, No IT by Hussein Badakhshani, and The War State by Mike Swanson about the rise of the military-industrial complex in America after World War II. He also gives great investment advice at wallstreetwindow.com. And when you follow his advice, you'll want to get some precious metals, gold and silver and etc. from Roberts & Roberts Brokerage Inc. That's at rrbi.co. rrbi.co. Also, check out Zencash at zencash.com or zensystem.io. It's a great digital currency, but it's also a messaging app and a document transfer app and all kinds of great stuff, too. Learn all about it at zencash.com. And then there's Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom. If you sign up from the link on my page at scotthorton.org, I'll get a little bit of a kickback there. And check this out. Speaking of scotthorton.org, if you'd like expanddesigns.com to build you a new 2018 model website, go to expanddesigns.com/Scott and you'll save $500. Also, don't forget thebumpersticker.com. Stickers for your band or your business at very reasonable prices. High quality stuff there. It used to be my company back when. Thebumpersticker.com.
Sorry, I'm late. I had to stop by the Wax Museum again and give the finger to FDR.
We know Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, is supporting the opposition in Syria. Are we supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria?
Well, it's a proud day for America. And by God, we've kicked Vietnam syndrome once and for all. Thank you very, very much.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked.
These witnesses are trying to simply deny things that just about everybody else accepts as fact.
He came, he saw, he died.
Well, we ain't killing their army, but we killing them. We be on CNN like, say our name, bitch, say it 3 times.
The meeting of the largest armies in the history of the world. Then there's going to be an invasion.
All right, you guys, introducing the great Phil Weiss. Mondo Weiss is his great website, mondoweiss.net, where he writes, and along with a lot of other great writers, too. And it's, to sum up, it's liberal, Jewish, anti-Zionism, ex-Zionism in a lot of cases, I think. That describes you pretty well, doesn't it, Phil?
Yeah, it sounds fine. Yeah, and you can't control your reputation, right, Scott? I mean, so I think that that's a perfectly legitimate description and, a nice one. But, there's some pretty negative things out there about me, too, but that comes with the territory.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Thank you.
And look, I mean, the question is obvious, right? Why would an American liberal Jew not be a Zionist? Or especially, why would you be anti-Zionist or even an ex-Zionist when it's your guys versus the other guys? So What the hell could explain that? It either means you're a kook or there's something really important going on.
Yeah, and, I would point out just, because I collect this type of information, but, this is my area, but David Rothkopf is the former editor of Foreign Policy magazine and said recently that American Jews once had a duty to support Israel, not long ago. So here you have a leading establishment Jewish voice saying that American Jews have this duty. Dennis Ross, the former White House negotiator, said American Jews must be advocates for Israel, not for Palestinians. So this is a clear ordination within the Jewish community that many have bucked, as I have. Anyone who cares about human rights has bucked it. David Rothkopf himself has said now, I have to oppose Israel. But it just reflects this historical demand on Jews.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, it's pretty easy to see why a Palestinian activist would be on the side of the Palestinians. But if American Jewish political people who are interested in this subject, right? Like, many American Jews don't care either way. or aren't even political at all on any foreign policies or domestic ones. For those who are interested, it might seem on the face of it like there must be something strange going on for you to have picked, quote, the other side in the conflict, and especially then for somebody like David Rothkopf. So what explains that?
I think that Israel is delegitimizing itself, in a word. And that is becoming evident to everybody. You got to be a fool not to see that Israel is delegitimizing itself. Its reputation has completely changed through its own actions. Now it's slaughtering protesters, nonviolent protesters on the border of Gaza, over 125 of them. I mean, it's obvious. And so this country that used to be seen as a valiant and plucky defender of freedom and the democracy in the Middle East is now understood to be just another right-wing dictatorship, one with strong ethno-religious discriminatory policies.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, so, I mean, obviously the big change here, supposedly at least, the big change in public sentiment seems to be revolving, or lately anyway, you talk about the massacre at the Gaza Strip against unarmed protesters, but there's this also this nation-state law, and this is what David Rothkopf is reacting to, and you even quote Alan Dershowitz saying that this was the wrong thing. But so in your article where you compare Brett Stevens to Stephen Douglas, in Mondo Weiss here, you talk about that he's really wrong. He says in his defense that, this law doesn't really change anything. It already just reiterates what everybody already knew, that this is the Jewish state and this kind of thing. But you say, no, that really is wrong, that this new nation state law does implement at least two severe changes in the way things are done in Israel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in fairness to these guys, some of it is image. This has truly changed Israel's image in a dramatic new fashion, and I am very grateful for that. But the fact is that Israel has been the quote-unquote Jewish state for a long time and has tried to stay under the radar about a lot of its discrimination. This puts the discrimination, makes it completely official and part of the Constitution or basic law of Israel. So I think that while Israel has been an apartheid state for many years now. I believe, because I have gone there and seen apartheid on steroids, as the former chancellor of Brown University put it. And a lot of people have had trouble coming around to that point of view. This law makes it clear this is an apartheid state. Now, I called out Stevens because Brett Stevens is part of this neoconservative pro-Israel faction in the United States that's trying to say, hey, nothing to see here, move along, this doesn't change Israel in any way, it's being misreported. I don't think it is being misreported. It's a dramatic shift officially, and it's already giving the settlers in the West Bank even greater freedom to legalize these outpost settlements, and they're seizing on it. And whether this is Netanyahu appealing to his right-wing base or a true reflection of what Israel's character is, I think those are indistinguishable. His right-wing base is Israel's character. Happily, there's some pushback in Israeli society now from Palestinians and liberal Jews. That's a great thing, and one hopes that Israel will reform itself, but it doesn't look very likely.
Mm-hmm. And now, so as far as the settlements on the West Bank and the settlers already invoking the law, can you be a little bit more detailed about how that's working?
Sure. An attorney for the state has said, look, there are these outpost settlements that you have declared illegal. The Supreme Court has declared illegal. We, the government, don't think they're illegal. We think that they're legal. And we can point to the nation-state of Israel law, the new nation-state law. That says at one point it has many provisions, one of which is settlement is a value in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. Eretz Israel means the entire land of historical Palestine, from the river to the sea. So this vague language that it offers a kind of carte blanche to the settlement movement, and the state's attorney, the state's own attorney on these issues, is seizing on it. And Peace Now, by the way, is a Jewish group that has opposed settlement valiantly for a long time. They've done a great job of that, and they are extremely alarmed by this. Now, I think it's more of the same. You have 600,000 settlers across the Green Line, so it's not like there's a big difference, but it's only fostering that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the way he says it here, and again, I don't know that this is really a change, but what a great quote where this state attorney, Harel Arnon, that you quote here in your article, it says here, he pointed out the nation-state law gives Jewish settlement a, quote, higher normative hierarchy.
God, wow.
I guess, well, the sentence before that is important. Arnon acknowledged that the rights of Palestinian property owners need to be taken into account. However, he pointed out that the nation-state law gives Jewish settlement a higher normative hierarchy. Therefore, in other words, stealing's okay if it's me from you.
Yeah, and if you're of the right race. And this is where the Bret Stephens thing comes in, because the New York Times runs these pro-Israel propagandists. It has several columnists who are essentially pro-Israel propagandists, or 2 or 3 of them anyway. And Stephens is saying nothing to see here, move along, and yet he's defending language like this, which is, as you observed, and as David Bromwich, who made this insight, observed, it recalls what Stephen Douglas said in the Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858. Lincoln says all people are created equal, and Stephen Douglas said, no, this country was founded by white people, and we are more equal than others. And that's what Bret Stephens and the nation-state law are doing. This is a state founded by the Jews. Jews are higher status than any other people. Mm-hmm. Full stop.
Well, and I guess part of the confusion, we've talked in the past numerous times about just how ignorant Americans are about who's occupying who over there and the level of propaganda and that kind of thing. I think part of it, just in a very simple way, comes down to, the narratives of history, of pogroms and the Holocaust and all these things. Yeah. And even in America, where Jews have had it typically a lot better than a lot of other places, they still were excluded, right? It was the WASP establishment that really ran everything, and they were relegated to more upper middle classes rather than real ruling classes and that kind of thing. I remember I was in high school when the last No Jews Allowed country club was bought by Jews down in Houston.
That's
the last one in Texas, but that was in the 1990s,
Yeah.
But so that just kind of leaves us with this sort of overall sense that, like blacks or Hispanics, that they're kind of somewhat in the oppressed minority, that's the history is of being oppressed. So, but in the story of Israel, it's just completely the other way around, where the Palestinians are treated, absolutely like blacks under Jim Crow or worse, and the Israelis are in the role of the KKK. And it's hard, I think, for Americans to wrap their head around that much could have changed in terms of who has how much power over who, with Jews in that situation, Yeah,
I mean, it's all a giant puzzle, but the fact is that Jim Crow regime is supported by a very powerful largely Jewish lobby in the United States, the Israel lobby. And whatever the Christian Zionists are doing for that lobby, they're not having much influence over the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has been foursquare behind those settlements and behind the occupation and in favor of the Gaza slaughter, and that's because of the, I believe, the Jewish role inside the Democratic Party and the amount of Jewish access that there is inside the Democratic Party. Now, that's something I'm trying to change as a Jew, but, 3 of the last 4 Supreme Court picks by Democrats were Jewish people, and that reflects our amazing success in America. And part of that success and access is a large role in foreign policy making when it comes to the Middle East. Dennis Ross, this guy who says American Jews must advocate for Israel, not Palestinians, he's been the lead negotiator in the White House for off and on for several administrations and has tilted totally to Israel's side. So you can't undo the role of the Israel lobby from this remarkable oppression and persecution that goes on there. And yes, the blindness to it, I accept that it has a lot to do with the collective memory among Jews of the tremendous persecution, an unrivaled chapter in human genocide, the Holocaust in Europe. Absolutely, that is what scars American Jews. You look at, I was just looking up today, you know, someone like Wolf Blitzer, who's played such a role in defending Israel in the media. You know, his family escaped, his parents escaped Auschwitz, you know, I believe, or grandparents. I think it was his parents. So he's got a reason. Doug Feith, who helped start the Iraq War, the stupidest effing man on the planet, his father's family was wiped out by the Holocaust. That's the background to a lot of this bizarre thinking. But I accept that people are drowned. There's deep trauma in the Jewish community for a very good reason.
Yeah.
But,
well, and I don't know about scarred, but I think, you know, the rest of Americans, you know, really think, you know, that was the best part of World War II was we saved the Jews from the Holocaust, which actually they didn't, right?
Yeah.
It was really American entry into the war helped get the thing going, even worse probably. But anyway, but that was the idea, though, was that maybe our great-grandfathers were anti-Semites, but we're not, you know, not since World War II and that kind of thing. And so it does carry over. Now, I wanted to ask you, because the way that you said it was, it's something I'm trying to stop. Was that Jewish access to the Democratic Party, or what what policies they prefer?
What policies they prefer. The access, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do about that.
I mean, it was just the way that you said it. I didn't want anybody misquoting you, really,
sure.
is all.
You know, look, I mean, elites, there have always been elites in American political life. And I think that, you know, right now Jews are part of the elite, by and large, in the Democratic Party. I don't know that I'm going to end that, personally. Certainly what I'm helping to end vigorously every day is that Jewish identification with Zionism. And increasingly you see young Jews who are taking a stance against that. And the Democratic Party is actually the party that seems to be heading towards a breakup over Israel, or that there is going to be a real factional dispute within the Democratic Party over Israel. Those who are against Israel and those who are for it. And I can't wait for that to happen, because finally the issue will be politicized. Americans will get to discuss this. Americans who don't like Israel's human rights record and want a balanced policy in Israel and Palestine are going to speak up, and American policy will change.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think too, is, you know, I'm not counting on a lot of great changes soon or anything, but for there to even be an honest fight about it at all. And you're right, I think implicitly here that nothing's happening on the right as far as this goes. But in terms of the Democrats, I mean, it's basically old money bags in charge of the thing and all the old guard organizers of it versus the people, you know, the basic, the rank and file progressive voters out there, Democrat voters. I mean, I don't think, you know, I don't know what the numbers are as far as how many of them are really good on this and have a principled take on a one state or a two state solution or something to make it not like this anymore. But you know, certainly their instincts are for fairness in whatever situation, you know, they would like to think anyway. So
I mean, and you know, but you look at the New York Times, which is the leading American newspaper. It has, we showed this today on our site, it has over the last few months run several columnists repeatedly saying that Israel's slaughter of nonviolent protesters on its border with Gaza is perfectly legitimate and is the only choice it has. Where else can you imagine 4 New York Times columnists, one after the other, and repeatedly defending the killing of nonviolent protesters? It's just impossible to imagine.
Right. And look at what happens when it's Iran in 2009 or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they freak out, beat them over the head with it for years afterwards.
Yes. And of course, although I would point out that, you know, as you show in your book, Fool's Errand, when Obama was slaughtering, you know, helping to slaughter civilians in Afghanistan, including hundreds of children, just a couple of years ago. You know, the media doesn't really make much of that either. So
Right.
there's some blind spots.
That's true. I mean, if anything, this is one of the silver linings of the Trump presidency is really helping to make this more and more of a partisan issue. When it's Trump, Adelson, and Netanyahu versus the world, there's a lot of people on the outside of that. You know?
Yeah. And so people, I noticed the media were paying attention to the Saudi attack in Yemen that killed a bunch of school kids.
Yeah.
You know, when has that happened before? That's because it can be pinned on Trump. So good thing.
Yeah, a little bit. And you know, it's the partisan dynamic on the entire anti-war issue, and including Israel and Palestine. The partisan dynamic has really just been poisonous.
Oh, I agree.
You know, with Barack Obama basically bribing, not the leftists, or at least the leftist writers stayed good, but kind of the rank and file out there, and then all the progressives and the liberals and the Democratic voters, they just all forgot they cared about war for 8 years straight. And now with the scandal being Trump's disloyalty to America, supposedly, and him being in the pocket of a foreigner, that disrupts the whole left against intervention narrative too, and makes them the hawks, you know, criticizing him for selling us out to the scary foreign enemy, which is just poisonous as hell. You know, I mean, they were supposed to be slinking back to the anti-war movement now, and now that's been delayed for another, period of time.
Scott, haven't you been disappointed on that front for a long time? I don't think that. I think liberal interventionism has been the kind of norm inside the Democratic Party for, since Bush, certainly. I mean,
well, since Wilson,
of course,
since Andrew Jackson. But since James Madison and the invasion of Canada. The Democrats, they're the warmongers. They always have been. But you know what? I guess I like to think of, that a lot of leftists are to the left, even, much more than on the right. You have a lot of people who are really to the left of the Democratic Party in a lot of good ways.
That's true.
I don't want them messing around with, property ownership and making us all go hungry. But I am in favor of opposing a lot of the same things that they oppose. You know what I mean?
Great.
So I'm happy to see that there's kind of that leftist pressure on the liberals that they always have to try to disown or try to co-opt or whatever it is. And that's what's happening here with Palestine too, is the liberals. I mean, to me, a liberal just means a Democrat voter. That's just, and they'll vote Democrat no matter what. But then to the left of that are progressives and leftists and other kind of, different kinds of leftists and who knows. But that's where the support for the Palestinians comes from, is from the left of the Democratic Party, except, it kind of works its way in and has its effect inside the Democratic Party, as you're, covering here. And so then in that context, what's going on at the New York Times is this, horrible, delayed and failed rearguard action to try to get out ahead of this.
Yes.
But preaching from the top of the New York Times, nobody's listening, right? I mean, are they?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think the New York Times still has a great deal of influence over liberal attitudes. And my co-author on that post is a guy named Donald Johnson, who frequents a lot of liberal Democratic sites as a commenter. Mm-hmm. He's very concerned with the discourse in the Democratic liberal, and he points to that divide that you just said and says these Democratic liberals are really owned by Israel. They do not see an alternative narrative. So he's very pessimistic. I'm very optimistic, as I think you are, but the Democratic Party is still, very pro-Israel, and they're afraid to take a step against it. So, and their readers and constituents aren't really woke on this one. So that's changing, but, it's dismal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have to be optimistic in the sense that I think, well, just like, with everything, the reason they have to lie so much is because what they're doing is wrong.
Yes.
And it's pretty much as simple as that. That's why the never-ending stream of lying and dissembling and complaining and smearing on behalf of Israel in this issue is because they're in the wrong. And anybody who like just got here from wherever and said, what's going on here, would take the side of the Palestinians because they're the ones who are the victims. Doesn't mean that they're the good guys in any particular circumstance. It just means that the Israelis are the aggressors and the Palestinians are the victims. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And, you know, my cousin just went over there for the first time. And I was, and went over there to see for herself and that kind of thing. She came back and said, it's just black and white. It's black and white. And her answer, she's a young person who's involved in, you know, progressive causes. Her feeling was young millennials with social media are going to can transform this issue in no time and ultimately will. I hope she's right. I mean, I do think that it's so blatant that when the word gets out in a sort of, you know, when you think of these other viral movements on the progressive side that have had a transformative effect, whether you like it or not, why couldn't that happen with Israel and Palestine? Why couldn't attitudes shift dramatically?
We need more memes with maps. I'm telling you, man. That's the problem here is nobody even has a map's bird's eye view of who's colonizing what over there. If anybody would ever just say, look, this is the West Bank. It doesn't belong to Israel, but they're taking it. This is the 22% that they were supposed to have left, and now they can't even have that. Now I understand is the response to that. But you got to show them, you know? I think that's a big part of it.
I agree. And that's what the nation-state bill does. It opens the door on that, too, because it's the land of Israel is the Jewish homeland, you know, given to us in the Bible. So...
well, and as you have this story here from a couple of weeks back about these students, these young American Jewish students on the Birthright trips over there, who you know tripped out over, you know, how blatant it is that I see the West Bank is all colored in on this map here as just being part of Israel, no more pretending, huh? And this, I guess, this one kid gets out of line and starts heckling the bus driver or something, right?
Right. Yeah, it was great. But, you know, just to step back from that for a second. So here are these Jewish kids getting this free trip to Israel. Anyone under 26 and under, you know, can go to Israel on Sheldon Adelson's nickel. Why are they taking Sheldon Adelson's money? You know, if it was the Koch brothers, you know, the Jewish community would say, don't go near that money. That's the Koch brothers. You know, here you have right-wing Sheldon Adelson, who has called on Obama to nuke Iran. And he's paying for their trip over there, and these good young liberal Jews who care about human rights are taking his money to go over there. What are they expecting? You know, and God bless them. They're trying to break up his trip. Some of them are. But it is a little bit of a sad reflection on the state of the Jewish community that you have good young liberal Jews, progressive kids who, you know, care about human rights, taking money from this very fascistic.
I guess I was looking at it like, wow, somebody did a little bit of homework before they went over there. And had enough, you know, enough wherewithal to stand up to the propaganda. But I guess, as you're saying, that's really just the exception.
Well, I guess I'm looking at that angle. But yeah, it was a very funny story, and people should know about it. I mean, part of it
because that usually doesn't happen, right? Usually it's like, oh, okay, I guess I learned something today or whatever. You know?
Yeah, it's a propaganda trip. And these kids had the wherewithal to say on the last day, wait, you didn't show us the occupation. We're going to see the occupation. We're going now to Hebron to see what's going on. And as soon as they said that, their tour guide turns on them and says, you won't be safe there. You can be raped there. You might get killed. And one of the participants, one of their fellow kids on this tour, goes up to them and says, you're going to get killed, you're going to get raped. Horrible statements to make just because they're going into a Palestinian area. So the degree of racism and bigotry inside the organized Jewish community is shocking. And that goes back to what John Mearsheimer, his challenge to me many years ago, the great political scientist, international relations at University of Chicago. He said, Phil, your people are the most educated, the most liberal, the smartest, the most cultured in America. They always have been. When I was, you know, became an academic, he said, how come they're supporting apartheid? Explain that to me. So obviously it goes to a lot of deep questions, but that's what's going on.
Right. All right, you guys, here's how to support the show. First of all, subscribe to the RSS feeds, iTunes, Stitcher, and all of that. All the feeds are available at scotthorton.org and also at libertarianinstitute.org. You can also follow me on youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. And sign up for Patreon. If you do, anybody who signs up for $1 per interview gets 2 free books from Listen and Think Audio. And also, you'll get keys to the new Reddit page, reddit.com/Scott Horton Show. And then if you go to scotthorton.org/donate, $20 will get you the audiobook of Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. $50 will get you a signed copy of the paperback there. And a $100 donation will get you either a QR code, commodity disc, or a lifetime subscription to Listen and Think Libertarian audiobooks. That's all at scotthorton.org/donate. And also, anybody donating $5 or more per month there, if you already are, or if you sign up now, you'll get keys to that new Reddit group as well. Already got about 50 people in there, and it's turning out pretty good. Again, that's reddit.com/Scott Horton Show. If you're already donating or you're a new donor, just email me, scott@scotthorton.org, and I'll get you the keys there. And hey, do me a favor, give me a good review on iTunes or Stitcher, or if you liked the book, on Amazon.com, and the audiobook is also on iTunes, and sure would appreciate that. And listen, if you want to submit articles to the Libertarian Institute, please do, and they don't have to be about foreign policy. My email address is scott@scotthorton.org. Hey, so tell me about the Haaretz op-ed, because it seems like, I mean, I guess the usual comparison is that Haaretz is the New York Times of Israel. Is that right?
Yeah, but Haaretz, I would say Haaretz is doing what the New York Times isn't doing. Haaretz is over there and is criticizing Israel vigorously and saying this is now an apartheid state, something you're not allowed to say in the United States, something the New York Times would not be saying. Haaretz is saying. So, yes, it's the elite publication of Israel, in the same way that the Times is the elite publication here. Yeah. But it's much more progressive.
You know, it seems like this nation-state law is, you know, overall so far a good thing in the sense that, you know, I mean, I'm not sure why David Rothkopf couldn't say that it was the duty of all people who care about human rights to oppose what Israel's government has been doing since at least 1967. I mean, at least the Nakba was a sustainable enterprise with the ethnic cleansing and all, you know, much more so than the occupation ever since then. You know, like the right of return is only an issue because the occupation is still an issue too. But if they'd taken, if the occupation had ended in 1968, then this wouldn't even be going on at all. But it seems like, as long as we're talking about apartheid, it's not just the nation-state law. Let's look at Gaza and the West Bank and all that.
But, Scott, you know, this goes again to my feeling about, you know, how do you get so woke? You know, here you are, you're in Texas, you know, you're doing your thing. It doesn't take I mean, not that you're not a really smart guy, but it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, right? I mean, where are our fellow Americans on that? Why aren't they getting a clue on this? And yes, I fault American Jews for being the reactionary forces here that are, you know, guiding the debate, controlling the debate to some degree or another, from Dennis Ross to the New York Times. But, you know, the rest of America, there's a little bit of intimidation. I don't know why they don't grow a pair on this, because it is obvious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and, you know, I don't have anything to lose, but I've made sure to keep myself in the position where I have nothing to lose. I wouldn't compromise on something like this. But that's why I don't even try to really get on a real, you know, AM station in town or that kind of thing, is they wouldn't let me on there with a anti-Zionist point of view. And I wouldn't go on there not able to talk about it, so I just keep doing this.
Fascinating.
But yeah, I mean, it's bad for business, no question about that.
Wow.
You know, as far as why I get it right, it's because I'm a libertarian, so it doesn't matter, you know. And Sheldon Richman, of course, has written, you know, all these great essays lately for the Libertarian Institute about this, where, you know, I really don't care what religion you believe in or what you look like or what in antiquity was your tribal contest with some other tribe. Everybody's an individual. That's how the West reinvented itself a few hundred years ago, and I kind of like it. The libertarians, we have, that kind of Declaration of Independence point of view crystallized and perfected for the rest of you. But that's where we start from, is everybody owns themselves and they own their property, and that's why it's wrong to steal from. So when then the Israelis say, nuh-uh, because ancient religion means that I have a superior property right than you have. What was the phrase again? We have it, it's right here. Higher normative hierarchy. Then, no, I don't buy that. That doesn't work on me. It never could, right?
That's
great.
All. That's great. That's a great tradition. I mean, if you have a tradition that informs you on that, that's wonderful. I mean,
and plus, it was all the neocons who lied us into Iraq War II.
Oh my God!
And they called it everything but this is what Ariel Sharon wants us to do, it was actually, I only found this out from reading J.J. Goldberg in the foreword, that it was really the Netanyahu faction of Likud more than Sharon. Sharon was really much more obsessed with Iran. It was the Netanyahu faction that was much closer to the American neocons, Richard Pearl and them, that really favored the attack in Iraq as much as Bush himself did. So anyway.
Yeah, and when Obama had the temerity to say that these are the same folks who got us into the Iraq War, or pushed us into the Iraq War, when the neocons and Netanyahu were gearing up against the Iran deal. He was called an anti-Semite for doing that. He was just pointing out the facts.
Yeah, and he was like, wait, I was only talking about Richard Pearl and his 6 friends. You're the one who pointed out what religion they supposedly are part of or whatever,
Yeah.
What does that have to do with it? You tell me. Hey, this is something that, Jim Loeb, the great scholar of neoconservatism, pointed out something that you talked about, that I think Paul Wolfowitz's family had been Holocaust survivors too. I know that, my wife, Larissa Alexandrovna, she interviewed Michael Ledeen numerous times back in the day, and she talked about how just absolutely crazy he was. And he was certain that all of the American Jews were going to be rounded up and put on cattle cars off to death camps at any time.
Wow.
That, you know what I mean? Like, you're talking about a level of paranoid schizophrenia.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He just couldn't be any further from the reality of what this country is like. You know what I mean? To believe that.
Right.
But that's really the mindset of the neocons. Like, they really are completely nuts about that kind of thing. And so you could see, and right, like, this is this story of what you guys have reported from Israel, is that they're so able in kind of a 2002 type fever of fear and accusation to convince themselves that everything they do really is in self-defense, and they really do have no choice but to do what, to protect themselves by waging all this aggression against everybody else. And I can relate because I'm from America, so I can see it. It's just, an uglier little microcosm, not really uglier, so just a microcosm of the same kind of thing that USA does to everybody too. And a lot of times because the Israelis want them to, but Yes.
It certainly, there's a lot of reflect. I mean, look, your book's chapters on some of those assaults in Afghanistan. Look what we did for the American brand over there. And Israel, was it a model or not? No, we were doing that on our own. So,
right. I mean, I certainly don't chalk up the Afghan war to Zionism in any sense,
No. I don't either. But, I think there's a psychosis and a paranoid streak that shows up. You saw it when, Israel will cite the Holocaust when they're destroying Palestinians and young Palestinians. They'll say, it's just, there's a psychosis at work. It's like Begin saying, we're going to get Hitler in his bunker when they were going after Arafat in Lebanon.
Right.
It's crazy.
God, is that a real quote? That's hilarious.
Yes. In
a sick and twisted way.
Hitler in his bunker. So
give me a break.
Yes. Crazy.
Did not anybody say to him in Hebrew, "Give me a break"? What the hell are you talking about?
I guess I should speak Hebrew because there are some sane voices over there. So.
Yeah. Gideon Levy, good for him. All right.
Yes.
Hey, listen, man. Oh, you know what? Can I keep you one more second? I want to ask you about Jeffrey Goldberg.
Oh, yeah, Jeffrey, yeah.
So tell me, it was some link I followed from something I was reading on your website this morning that led me to this piece by Dave Cleon about Jeffrey Goldberg and his role in the media as the editor of The Atlantic and former Iraq War II monger who lied about Saddam and Osama in The New Yorker and all that. But he's really played this really important role in American media in kind of, cracking the whip about who's allowed to say what and that kind of thing. But you have talked about and written lately about that changing too, his role in the media. And wait, is it that he's covering his own ass now? Is that it? He's just a little bit ahead of the curve, of his own curve?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think that my view, and I'm curious to hear your take on the Cleon piece, which I have not read carefully. I just glanced at it. My view is that Jeffrey Goldberg is his main job at The Atlantic now is heading the Democratic resistance to Trump. And that's the way he conceives his job. He is going to do anything he can to take Trump on and to champion liberal human rights values. And part of that means throwing Israel under the bus. So I don't see him defending Israel anymore because he knows that the coalition that he's building, which is a feminist coalition, people of color, the Democratic base, you cannot really defend Israel's record in that base. So I think he is abandoned Israel because he has a bigger job than that now, which is to quote unquote, save the United States.
And now he didn't say anything bad about him. He's just silent on all these issues now, or what? I mean, I admit I don't read him. I can't stand to.
I don't follow him super close, but every time Israel does something really stupid, which it does a lot of lately, from slaughtering nonviolent protesters on the Gaza border to passing this nation state of the Jewish people law, I don't see Jeffrey Goldberg popping his head up over the bunker anymore because he knows this is indefensible and he has too much important work to do to create this progressive coalition. You see him running stuff that is, it's Democratic base. And by Democratic base, I mean that progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Very feminist, pro-LGBTQ rights, people of color, the monuments. That is all part, and the country's history of racism. These are all things that he has to report and investigate now to sort of rally that base, and that he's putting on the cover of his magazine. So I don't see him touching the Israel issue.
Yeah. Liberals, they're so ironic with all the crazy things they do and think and the sides they take. I got to take the good with the bad here, I guess. If he's, backing down finally a little bit on his role of commissar of who's allowed to write what in the world. I was reminded by Cleon in that thing of his smear against Walt and Mearsheimer, and the way Cleon puts it, he wrote 1,000 words before he even mentioned their names. First, he had to bring up Father Coughlin, and
right,
whatever.
Right. I should reread that, because I remember that well. That's a great point to bring up.
I wanted to get on Twitter for a second and slam Cleon though for smearing, and quite ironically, I thought smearing Ron Paul in this piece for supposedly being associated with right wingers. Whatever. And then who does he link to? Jamie Kirchick, the lowest slime bag who just smeared Ron Paul with obvious nonsense, about some trumped up old bullshit that somebody else wrote anyway.
Absolutely. And who's where's the anti-war left? That's there again. Where's the anti-war left?
Yep. And you know what? And he was Cleon was just making a point about, Goldberg once saying, hey, Ron Paul's kind of Zionist because he's saying, you know what? We should just stop financing Israel. We should stop telling Israel what to do, which is a pretty good non-interventionist take for a Republican trying to stay in office, I guess.
Yes.
But he's actually much more anti-Zionist than that when it comes to like whose side he feels for or whatever. And he said in the past about that. But then, so in other words, Cleon, he didn't need to slam Ron Paul at all. All he had to do was say, here's a guy that Jeffrey Goldberg would oppose on any other thing, probably, right? But he's willing to take his side if he says something that can be interpreted in a pro-Zionist fashion or something.
Yeah.
So, but instead he has to cite Jamie Kirktrick smearing the great Ron Paul, who's one of the greatest, peacemongers and truth tellers in our society.
I'm with you.
It's sickening.
Yeah.
And you know what? People like me give credit to leftists like you and to Dave Cleon all day.
I know,
but we
Wes,
don't ever deserve that same respect back whatsoever somehow, I mean, I'm not accusing you, but you know what I mean.
No, I understand. And look who's been one of the leaders of the anti-Iran war run-up stuff is Patrick Buchanan, and the left won't touch him, And, I'm sorry, Pat has said some really smart stuff about this. And how are you going to take on the neocon liberal interventionist coalition? These guys never lost their jobs despite supporting the biggest foreign policy mistake of, the last 50 years. They're still in force. They're still ensconced in Washington, in large part because of the Israel lobby, I believe. And how are we going to take them on? We got to build a coalition, and that's going to include some, diverse ideological segment.
And I mean, it seems obvious too that it's just great shtick for leftists anyway to say, look, we're so right about this that even Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul, the paleo-conservative and the libertarians, say we're right. That this is, they even use the word empire because that's how corrupt this project is. Right. This is not just a bad idea. It's really wrong. That kind of thing. It's we should be useful for covering their right flank. But I don't know. I guess they don't feel that that's, either necessary or desirable for whatever set of reasons. But
there you're pointing out this true intellectual compatibility of these two groups. So, I think,
and Pat really is far to the right of Ron. I mean, Pat is a paleo-conservative for real isolationism in the sense of, less international trade and using law to preserve the old way and make America great again and all that. You don't get that from Ron. Ron's a, real libertarian. But
I mean, where do you see this? The liberal intervention, the Democratic establishment right now is liberal interventionist. It just is. Yeah. And they like the American empire. They love that idea because some of the elites are sustained by globalization. And, there's a lot of wealth that's been produced by globalization for 20%.
Hey, look at why the neocons are so bad. I mean, other than the fact that they put Israel first, it's that they're a bunch of liberal Democrats. They're a bunch of, they joined the Reaganites because the Reaganites were the ones who had access to the military power for a while. But, Richard Pearl is still a card-carrying Democrat. That's and there's a great essay. It may have been Murray Rothbard who wrote about how, people always said about LBJ that, well, he had all these great social programs and everything, but then Vietnam really dragged down his legacy, and that was the dark side of what he did. But the answer, or this argument was no. In fact, the Vietnam War was part and parcel of the Great Society. That the Great Father Washington in the East is going to come and make everything your way for you, including make sure that the people on the south side of the line down there vote Catholic or whatever. And they're just going to make sure because they can do what they want. They can make things better and right with power rather than with liberty. And so, in that sense, you can see where it's not confusing, right? Why Samantha Power and Susan Rice would support using the military to stop a slaughter somewhere when, of course, they're just inducing worse ones. But it's part of their ideology. There's this is all one big sociology class. What can we do to make things the way we want them to be? And so,
good point. Yes. And
whereas a true conservative like Pat Buchanan would say, look, we got to face down those commies. But once the commies are gone, well, who are we facing down now? What is this? Right. We're supposed to be, as even Jeane Kirkpatrick said, a normal country in a normal time. Now that the emergency's over, and instead we go trumping up emergencies to go and solve. And that's not conservative. And in fact, Michael Ledeen, we talked about before, the great neocon, great in that bad way, he was asked one time, how come you guys are called neoconservatives when all you preach is world revolution? Right. And he goes, that's a real good question. I never use that word. I mean, because you're right. It's not conservative. We want to overthrow every government on the planet and remake everything our way. And he sounds like Leon Trotsky himself,
Yes. I mean, that's how the neocons started with, Norman Podhoretz and Irving Kristol, Bill Kristol's dad, saying, hey, we have to support America's war-making powers. Because that is what is going to support Israel. And that's what they've done. They came out against George McGovern because he was going to sap American strength. And that they jumped to the Republican Party over that. So they're a war party.
Yep.
Yes.
Bad times. All right.
Well, Scott, this has been a pleasure.
I know. I was just going to say something like that. I always enjoyed talking to you quite a bit, Phil. Appreciate it.
Same. It's the same, man. Real meeting of the minds. So, okay, well, you can turn that air conditioner back on down there now.
I'm going to. And I got to recommend to everyone, sign up for the morning email. It's such a great way to start your day over at mondoweiss.net. I really mean that. It's great. And it's not just Phil Weiss, but he's got a bunch of great writers there covering politics here and in Europe and in Israel and the occupation and the situation in Gaza and everything, man. It's really great. Thanks again, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, y'all. Thanks. Find me at libertarianinstitute.org, at scotthorton.org, antiwar.com, and reddit.com/Scott Horton Show. Oh, yeah, and read my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, at foolserrand.us.